Imagine standing at the crossroads of time, watching an event unfold, only to realize that your very presence, your very attempt to influence it, is what ensured it happened exactly as you had seen. No matter the path you choose, no matter the urgency of your intervention, the outcome remains inexorably tethered to your own actions. It is as though the future, already written, reaches backwards through the corridors of causality, scripting the choices you believed were freely made. This is the haunting beauty of the predestination paradox, a puzzle where cause and effect seem to collapse into one another, where destiny is not merely a final destination, but a force that bends the traveler to its will. You do not simply walk toward the future reaches back to pull you forward. The 2014 film Predestination, based on Robert A. Heinlein's short story All You Zombies, offers a vivid, haunting depiction of this idea. Through intricate, mind-bending loops of identity, purpose, and causality, it captures the unsettling realization that one's attempts to alter the future may in fact be fulfilling it, that destiny is not resisted, but realized through every desperate act. At its heart, the predestination paradox poses a question both unsettling and profound. If the future is set, how free are we to shape it? Or even more provocatively, are we the authors of our lives, or merely the scribes, writing what has already been dictated by time itself? Picture a traveler from the future, arriving in the past to prevent a disaster. Through a series of desperate actions, they inadvertently cause the very catastrophe they sought to avert. In trying to change the future, they fulfill it, and thus the cycle completes itself, endlessly and immutably. Such scenarios feel familiar to us. They echo through stories of time travel, through philosophical musings, through whispered fears about fate and inevitability. But beyond fiction, the paradox challenges something deeply rooted in our understanding of time, choice, and reality. Is the universe a closed loop, with all events intricately intertwined beyond our comprehension? Is destiny a living force weaving past, present, and future into a seamless tapestry, one we can walk upon but never alter? These questions are not merely abstract. They linger in the background of our daily lives. In every decision, in every moment, we wonder if our choices matter, or if perhaps we are walking paths laid down long before our first breath. As we delve deeper into the predestination paradox, we are invited into a labyrinth where time folds inward, causality dances in circles, and the boundary between freedom and fate becomes beautifully and maddeningly blurred. The roots of the predestination paradox stretch deep into the intertwined histories of philosophy, science, and storytelling. While the formal articulation of the paradox in its modern form is a product of 20th century thought experiments surrounding time travel, its spirit, the entanglement of destiny and causality, can be traced back to ancient contemplations about fate and free will. In the ancient world, philosophers like Aristotle pondered the nature of future events. His famous discussion of the sea battle, questioning whether a future naval conflict is already determined or not, gestured toward the same deep uncertainty that the predestination paradox evokes. If an event tomorrow is either true or false today, then is the future already fixed? Or is it still in some sense open? Centuries later, theological debates in the medieval period wrestled fiercely with similar dilemmas. Christian thinkers, for instance, grappled with the paradox of divine omniscience. If God already knows everything that will happen, does human free will truly exist? Can choice be real if the outcome is foreseen and inevitable? Yet it was not until the advent of time travel as a serious concept in science fiction, and eventually in speculative physics, that the predestination paradox was crystallized with clarity. Herbert George Wells' The Time Machine, published in 1895, laid early narrative groundwork, although Wells himself leaned more toward the exploration of technological and social implications of time travel than intricate causality loops. It was the mid-20th century that truly brought the paradox into sharper focus. Writers like Robert Anson Heinlein introduced stories in which time travelers unintentionally caused the very events they were trying to change, a narrative structure that captured the eerie self-consistency at the heart of the paradox. Heinlein's short story By His Bootstraps, 1941, and later All You Zombies, 1959, explored closed causal loops where characters become their own parents or agents of their own destiny in ways that seem impossible, yet are logically airtight once the sequence is accepted. Meanwhile, physicists began to toy with the logical implications of time travel within the framework of general relativity. The concept of closed time-like curves, theoretical paths through space-time that loop back upon themselves, suggested that, under certain extreme conditions, such paradoxes might not merely be fiction, but conceivable within the laws of physics. Scientists like Kurt Gödel and later Kip Thorne and others proposed mathematical models in which such loops could exist. Though still speculative, these ideas gave academic credibility to the philosophical dilemmas raised by the paradox. Thus, from ancient debates about fate to modern theories of space-time, the predestination paradox has evolved into a potent symbol, a place where philosophy, physics, and imagination converge. It reminds us that questions about choice, causality, and destiny are not just ancient musings, nor mere speculative fiction, but living inquiries at the heart of our attempts to understand the universe itself. At its essence, the predestination paradox invites us to examine a startling possibility: that actions intended to prevent a future event may, paradoxically, be the very actions that ensure its occurrence. To see this clearly, let us step into a thought experiment. Imagine a man who lives in a peaceful town. One day he receives a mysterious letter, warning him that the town's library will be destroyed by fire at midnight. Determined to prevent this tragedy, he rushes to the library that evening, searching for anything suspicious. In his frantic search, he accidentally knocks over an old lantern, which shatters on the ground. The oil catches fire, and despite his best efforts, the flames engulf the library, just as the letter had predicted. At first glance, it would seem as though he was caught in a cruel coincidence. Yet a deeper inspection reveals something stranger. Without his intervention, without his desperate attempt to prevent the disaster, the fire would not have started at all. He was not merely a bystander to fate, he was the instrument by which it was fulfilled. The warning, intended as a message to avert destruction, paradoxically became the catalyst for that very destruction. This is the core of the predestination paradox. It challenges the very structure of causality. Normally, we think of cause and effect moving in a straight line. Action leads to consequence. But here, cause and effect loop into one another. The attempt to change the future becomes the cause of the future itself. The paradox raises an unsettling possibility. If we could travel into the past to prevent an event, we might instead become its cause. If we try to warn someone about their destiny, we might ensure they walk directly into it. The implications ripple outward. What then becomes of free will? Are we actors with the power to change outcomes? Or are we part of a grand design? Each decision, each choice already woven into the fabric of inevitability. The predestination paradox also forces us to question our understanding of time itself. Is time a flowing river, carrying us along from past to future? Or is it more like a landscape, a fixed terrain where every point, every event already exists, waiting for us to traverse it? There is a certain beauty in the idea that time is not something we move through, but something we participate in, a cosmic symphony where every note is already written, yet still must be played. And perhaps the most haunting musing of all, if every attempt to alter the future is already part of the future, can we ever truly change anything at all? Or are we, like the traveler who causes the fire he meant to prevent, caught in a dance with destiny, every step already choreographed, even as we feel the pulse of choice beneath our feet? When first encountering the predestination paradox, many thinkers, writers, and casual observers offer interpretations that feel intuitive, attempts to bring some order to the disquiet it stirs. At the surface level, these interpretations offer frameworks for understanding, even if they do not fully resolve the paradox's deeper mysteries. One common interpretation is that the paradox is simply a narrative device, a fiction born from human imagination. In this view, the closed loop of cause and effect is seen as a storytelling tool, effective in science fiction, but not something that truly challenges the nature of reality. The emotional and intellectual tension it creates is compelling, but ultimately, it is treated as a philosophical curiosity, not a real-world possibility. Yet, even as a literary device, the paradox reveals something fascinating about our perceptions of time and agency. Stories that employ predestination loops, like in films such as 12 Monkeys or Arrival, tap into a deep-seated human anxiety that despite all effort, despite all striving, we might be powerless to alter the most significant events of our lives. Another surface-level interpretation frames the paradox in deterministic terms. From this perspective, the future is already set, and human beings simply fulfill their roles within a vast, unalterable sequence of events. In this view, the sense of choice is an illusion. We act because we must, following the script written by the universe itself. Determinism offers a certain comfort, a belief that there is an order to things, even if it is one we cannot control. But it also raises troubling questions. If every action, every thought was inevitable, what becomes of morality, responsibility, or the meaning of personal effort? Some thinkers take a more psychological route. They suggest that the predestination paradox symbolizes cognitive biases in how humans perceive cause and effect. Perhaps the paradox reveals not a fundamental flaw in reality, but a flaw in how we interpret complex sequences of events. According to this view, we are meaning makers by nature. Faced with intricate systems of causes and consequences, we weave stories that seem to close loops where none truly exist. Our minds crave coherence, and so we imagine destiny where there may be only randomness. Another interpretation proposes that the paradox reflects the limits of human comprehension. Just as quantum mechanics defies classical intuition, so too might the nature of time and causality operate beyond our conceptual frameworks. The predestination paradox, then, would not be a logical contradiction, but a signal, a sign that our cognitive tools are simply too blunt to grasp the true nature of temporal reality. At the surface, each of these interpretations offers something valuable. They help contain the paradox within manageable philosophical, literary, or psychological boundaries. Yet none of them fully dispels the lingering wonder or the unease that the predestination paradox awakens. Beneath each tidy explanation, a deeper invitation remains. To step beyond easy answers, to peer into the swirling complexities of time, choice, and existence. The predestination paradox is not merely a clever narrative twist or a philosophical puzzle for idle contemplation. At its deepest levels, it forces us to re-examine foundational assumptions about time, causality, and selfhood. Let us begin with the notion of time itself. In our everyday experience, time seems to flow. The past lies behind us. The present unfolds before us, and the future stretches ahead, unseen. But the predestination paradox suggests something profoundly different. That time may be more like a static landscape, a totality that exists all at once. Past, present, and future are not moving parts, but fixed structures, already woven into the fabric of the universe. This block universe theory, rooted in the philosophy of eternalism and supported by interpretations of Einstein's theory of relativity, suggests that every moment in time exists simultaneously. Just as every location exists independently in space, so too every event exists independently in time. In such a universe, to travel to the past would not be to change it, but merely to inhabit it, like walking to a different part of a city you have already visited. And any actions you perform there would already be part of the tapestry, necessary and inevitable. Thus, from the block universe perspective, the predestination paradox is not paradoxical at all. It simply reflects the structure of reality. You are always going to go back, always going to cause the fire, always going to fulfill your role. The unsettling feeling that you could have chosen differently is perhaps a mirage, a cognitive artifact of limited temporal perception. Yet if we accept this model, where does that leave free will? Are we truly making choices, or merely enacting a predetermined script? The predestination paradox suggests that even acts of rebellion, even desperate attempts to alter fate are themselves foretold. One philosophical response is compatibilism, the idea that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. Even if the future is fixed, our choices can still be meaningful expressions of who we are. They are determined, yes, but determined by our own character, desires, and reasoning. Another more unsettling response is hard determinism, which denies free will entirely. From this view, agency is an illusion, and our sense of autonomy is merely the subjective experience of following an inevitable path. The predestination paradox, then, becomes a stark mirror, reflecting back the terrifying possibility that we are passengers on a journey whose route was laid long before we boarded. Another layer of the paradox challenges the very nature of causality. Normally, we think of causes preceding effects. Strike a match and then see it burn. Speak a word and then hear its echo. But in a closed causal loop, the sequence becomes circular. The effect is its own cause. The beginning is born from the end. In the library example, the letter warning of the fire exists because the fire occurred, but the fire occurred because of the warning. There is no independent origin, no first cause. This challenges the classic metaphysical principle known as the principle of sufficient reason, which holds that everything must have a cause or reason. In a predestination loop, the cause and effect sustain each other without any external explanation. The loop is self-contained, self-sustaining, and from a certain perspective self-created. Some physicists argue that such loops could exist without contradiction, provided they are self-consistent. This is the basis of the Novikov self-consistency principle proposed by physicist Igor Novikov. It posits that any actions taken by a time traveler were always part of history, and thus paradoxes are avoided because events adjust themselves to remain consistent. In this view, reality would somehow conspire to prevent contradictions, allowing time travel perhaps, but only in ways that preserve the fixed structure of history. One of the most poignant aspects of the predestination paradox is the illusion it creates, the illusion that change is possible. When the traveler receives the warning, when they rush to the library, they believe they are acting to alter fate. They are filled with urgency, hope, desperation. Yet every step they take is already part of the unfolding destiny. Their belief in the possibility of change is sincere, and yet from the wider view, it is merely the fulfillment of a predetermined arc. This invites a haunting thought. How much of our striving, our longing, our effort might simply be the playing out of a cosmic story already written? It does not rob those feelings of their intensity or meaning, but it invites humility, a recognition that our place in the tapestry of existence may be smaller and more tightly woven than we like to imagine. Some have speculated that the bizarre world of quantum physics might offer new ways to understand the predestination paradox. In quantum mechanics, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, until observed, a phenomenon known as superposition. Some interpretations, like the many worlds theory, suggest that every possible outcome of a quantum event actually occurs, each in its own branching universe. From this view, attempts to change the future might not be doomed to failure. They might simply create new timelines, new branches of reality. However, the predestination paradox specifically imagines a single, consistent timeline. In that frame, quantum indeterminacy does not rescue free will or open up new paths. It merely adds complexity to the ways events can self-consistently loop. Thus, even in the strange dance of quantum particles, the fundamental mystery remains intact. Finally, the predestination paradox resonates because it mirrors a deep feature of human life, the feeling that our efforts to escape certain outcomes often bring them about. In trying to avoid pain, we sometimes create it. In striving to change ourselves, we sometimes entrench our flaws. In seeking to outmaneuver fate, we sometimes race directly into its embrace. The paradox, then, is not just about time travel or metaphysics. It is about the human condition, the poignant, courageous, and sometimes tragic effort to alter a destiny that may, in the end, have been inevitable all along. If the predestination paradox were only a curiosity of time travel stories, it would be a fascinating but isolated concept. Yet its echoes reach far beyond the realm of speculative fiction, resonating quietly through the chambers of everyday life, philosophy, and even our understanding of human endeavor. In our personal lives, how often do we encounter moments where attempts to avoid an outcome seem to guarantee its arrival? The parent, desperate to prevent a child's mistake, inadvertently steers them toward it. The company that overcorrects for a minor error creates the very crisis it feared. In trying to control the future, we often shape it in unintended and sometimes unavoidable ways. On a broader level, the paradox invites reflection on history itself. Wars begun to prevent imagined threats sometimes ignite the very conflicts they sought to avoid. Policies crafted to eliminate risks often create new, unforeseen vulnerabilities. The dance of action and consequence does not always move in straight lines. The predestination paradox whispers to us that there is a hidden architecture to events, one that may be less malleable than we like to believe. In philosophy, the paradox offers a profound lens on the nature of knowledge and ignorance. If knowing the future leads us inevitably to fulfill it, then knowledge becomes a double-edged sword. Awareness does not always grant freedom. Sometimes it tightens the web of inevitability around us. And in the quietest corners of existential reflection, the paradox raises perhaps the most intimate question: what does it mean to live a meaningful life if the broad strokes of our journey are already drawn? Is the value of existence found not in changing destiny, but in living it fully, in playing our role with grace, even when we cannot alter the script? These questions do not demand answers. They linger, like soft echoes in a vast hall, inviting contemplation rather than resolution. The predestination paradox is not a trap from which we must escape. It is a mirror held up to the human soul, reflecting both our yearning to be free and the intricate patterns that shape us beyond our knowing. To walk through life aware of these patterns is not to surrender, but to awaken. It is to move through the landscape of time, not as its master nor as its victim, but as a participant in a story larger, stranger, and perhaps more beautiful than we can fully comprehend. In the end, the predestination paradox leaves us not with conclusions but with quiet wonder. It does not force us to choose between freedom and fate, between action and inevitability. Instead, it invites us to hold both realities in our hands, to feel their delicate tension without demanding that it resolve. There is a subtle beauty in this unresolved thought. Like a melody that ends not on a firm note but fades into silence, the paradox leaves space for reflection and for peace. Perhaps it is not our task to conquer destiny, nor to unravel the mystery of time. Perhaps it is enough to walk our paths with open eyes, to act with sincerity, knowing that even in a world of fixed stars and circling loops, meaning is not lost. Meaning is lived. The predestination paradox reminds us that uncertainty is not an enemy to be defeated, but a companion, one that walks with us through the winding corridors of existence, whispering that the dance between freedom and fate is itself a kind of grace. And in that soft, lingering thought, we find something timeless, a quiet invitation to wonder, to imagine, and to continue walking, even when the path is both known and unknowable.